All right. So we shall begin. Okay, we're at 15A1, left-hand column, bottom half of the page of the column on a similar theme. We had just mentioned, we're talking about who were prophets, how do we know that they were prophets, and that we ended up saying that certain prophets were prophets, that the children of prophets, they got prophecy in their own family as well. And now we are going to be looking at some other kinds of links that we make when we would deduce from the text. Something is mentioned that we understand more than that from the hint in the text on a similar theme. Okay, so Bill, I'm going to ask you to read, please.
Okay, on a similar theme, in a Baraita, it was taught, anyone whose deeds and whose father's deeds are generally undisclosed, that is, they are not explicitly stated in scripture, and the verse singles out one of them for praise, for example, the word of Hashem which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, it is evident that he is a righteous man, the son of a righteous man. And wherever the verse singles out one of them for vilification, for example, and it was in the 7th month that Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, the son of Nethaniah, the son of Elishama, came and murdered the righteous Gedaliah, son of Ahikam. It is evident that he is a wicked man, the son of a wicked man.
Right. So when somebody is mentioned as doing something good, but their father's name is added to their name, then we give the father credit. The father must have been a good man also, and therefore modeling the good behavior for their child, influence their child. And now we're talking about the good thing that the child did, but no longer a child, of course, now an adult. And then the same thing, if a person is guilty of something bad, and the person and the father's name is added to identify them, then we deduce from the addition of the father's name that the father is going to get blamed for being a bad influence as well. And we don't know what the bad action was of the parent, but it ended up having further ramifications where then his child, when he grew up, also turned out to be a rotten apple. Right, so these are the deductions that we make. Okay, so this is, just reflective, to a certain extent, of the kind of curiosity that many people express when you hear about a particular person. What kind of background did they have? What kind of upbringing did they have? How did they turn out the way they turned out? We're always curious about the modeling that the parents did, and the education and the environment and so on. So this is the Gemara, suggesting that that's part of the text itself, because you don't have to mention the father all the time, and yet here it is. Okay, go ahead, Rav Nachman.
Rav Nachman said the prophet identified in scripture as Maliki was actually Mordecai. And why was Mordecai given the name Maliki? Because he was second in power to King Achashverosh.
Right, Malachi, right? And the word Malachi is the name of a prophet, right? There's a prophetic book called Malachi. Zechariah, Malachi, and Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi are the last 3 prophets who lived at the beginning of the building of the second temple. So who is Malachi? The word Malachi, it's not clear. Is this a personal name? Or is it simply a descriptor? My messenger, my malach. A malach is an angel or a messenger. The word angel means messenger, agent. So when it says malachi, God says my agent. What was the real identity of Malachi? So here we have an answer that Malachi was actually Mordecai, right? And why is he given the name Malachi?
According to this, because he was second in power to King Achashverosh.
Okay, so what kind of answer is that? He's second in command. He's second in command to Achashverosh. So whose agent is he? Achashverosh is the agent, right? He does whatever Achashverosh has appointed him to do, which would be a little bit surprising because the word Malachi in the context of the prophetic book is God's agent, right? So the fact that he's being called my agent, is it with a capital M or with a small lowercase m? No, is he called my agent because Achashverosh, he's my right-hand man. I can always depend on him, right? So he was called Malachi. So he was called Malachi by extension. And then he has this prophetic book that he produces with visions for and guidance for the beginning of the resurrection of the Jewish community in the land of Israel. If you look in the note gives a slightly different interpretation. Note 9.
Note 9 from Esther chapter 10. He was considered as important as an agent, Malach, and therefore he was known as Malachi. That's Maharsha's interpretation.
Right, so he was a really important, he was a VIP. So again, what we have, it's a very appropriate kind of ambiguity for Purim, because that's what Purim is all about, right? The human dimension, and then seeing a divine dimension in a human dimension. God's name is never mentioned in the Purim story, and yet we see God's hand operating. That's why we celebrate it as a divinely produced miracle, and we're grateful for it. We wouldn't make it a holiday simply if it was just a lot of historical coincidence. So the idea that Mordechai is given stature as both second in command to Achashverosh and second in command to God. When we say, when we read the Megillah, there's a custom, I think it's the 4th chapter or I don't remember which chapter it is, where it says that at night, the sleep of the king was unsettled. Nadadash nata melech. And this is Achashverosh couldn't sleep that night. Balayla hahu nadadash nata melech. It's the beginning of one of the chapters in the Megillat Esther. So, and then he reads, he says, I can't sleep. So you know what? Somebody read to me. So read to me from the book of records. And then they read to him about how Mordechai had saved his life. And that's the turning point in the story. So there's a custom to read that beginning verse, those beginning words, by Balayla hahu nadada shnat hamelech. On that night, the sleep wavered, was unstable, the sleep of the king. So hamelech is the king. Hamelech is also the word that we begin our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening with in earnest. The Baal Shachrit, the person who leads the morning Shachrit prayers, starts with Hamelech Yoshev. So, and in many Machzorim, including the Lev Shalem, the word Hamelech is written big. And that's the king of kings. This is God, who sits on the throne of judgment and the throne of mercy. So that's the word, it refers to God. So when we read the Megillah, where the word ostensibly refers to Achashverosh, we read it and we go, which has nothing to do with the trop for Megillas Esther. It's the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur chanting, because what we say is actually all of the troubles and all of the anguish that was going on and Haman's machinations, and then God awoke, so to speak. So it's not just Achashverosh who couldn't sleep and who wakes up, but God, as it were, wakes up at that moment and starts spinning the events of the time in order to bring about the salvation for the Jews. So Achashverosh and God are both referred to as HaMelech, right? Okay. But after all of that I just said, look at what the Gemara does.
The Gemara refutes this statement. They raised an objection from the following Baraita. Baruch, son of Neiriah, Seraiah, son of Machseah, Daniel, Mordechai, Bilshan, Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi all prophesied in the second year of the reign of Darius. The Baraita lists Mordechai and Malachi separately, clearly indicating that they were separate individuals. This is indeed a refutation of the previous opinion.
Okay, so I retract everything I said before. That's all. So it's all wrong. Tiyufta, no, can't be. They must be two separate people. Okay, good.
Further discussion of Malachi's identity. It was taught in a Baraita. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korchach said Malachi was actually Ezra, but the sages say Malachi was his real name. That is, the name Maliki refers to a prophet of that name and is not the secondary name of someone else.
Okay, so again, do we see this as a kind of a description of this nameless person? He was my agent. He was my angel. He was my messenger. And then we look for significant people who lived at that particular era. So we have one attempt to identify this agent of God as Mordechai. And then we knock that off. Now we have another suggestion. The suggestion is, well, there's another super important religious leader who, acted on behalf of God during this particular period, and that's Ezra. So maybe that's Ezra is called my right-hand man, my agent. And so we have it, and other people say, no, what are you knocking yourself out to try to find some other person who satisfies this? The person's name was Malachi. That was his name. He was another person in and of himself in his own right. He was a religious leader. But the dispute centers around, depends on this idea of, is that just a generic term that's being used for him, or is it actually his proper name? So now we're going to go into the whole point about Ezra, because again, these are turning points in the development of the Jewish national story. And that's why Purim is the last holiday to make it into the biblical canon, right? Hanukkah doesn't make it. Hanukkah is a little too late, but Purim just makes it. So Purim is at the cusp of a turning point in Jewish history. So it's not a biblical holiday, but it's a, scripture, the Tanakhic holiday, right? It makes it in through the back door, and it's about the regeneration of the Jewish people, right? We're at the brink of disaster, the brink of extermination, and we come back to life. So we come back to life both physically, and we come back to life also spiritually. We're actually able, after the Achashverosh reign, when we get into later Persian rulers, we have Daryavesh, and then we have Koresh, and then we get back into the land of Israel, and we build a second temple. So that turning point is very interesting. When this is Hanukkah, right? Next to last day of Hanukkah. Traditionally, we recite a prayer within our Amidah, within our benching, Al Hanisim. And we talk about, the miracle of Hanukkah. And we're not going to go into all of the discussion about what the we don't talk about the miracle of the oil lasting 8 days when it should only last 1 day. But nevertheless, we say that in the days of Matityahu and his sons, that the regime of Greece, or the Syrian Greeks, right, tried to destroy our Torah, stop us from learning, from observing the Torah, and take us away from our religious practices. Right? That's what it says for Hanukkah. We have another Al Hanisim, the Al Hanisim for Purim. For the Al Hanisim for Purim, what do we say? We don't say that Haman tried to take us away from the Torah. We say plain and simple, Haman tried to destroy us. Haman tried to exterminate us. So the Purim story, the central element is the physical survival of the Jewish people. The Hanukkah story is the spiritual threat to the Jewish people that we were able to resist. And yes, of course, we had to resist it by fighting and so on. But the Hanukkah story is centering on, will we continue to observe the Torah? The Purim story is literally what Haman wanted. Haman wanted to destroy the Jews, period. Right? Flesh and blood. Right? So the Haman story is, will there be a Jewish people? Right? Will there be a Jewish people? And then, of course, the Jewish people without the Torah is an oxymoron. So then, do we come back to life again? So now we're going to see this moment, this inflection point in Jewish history is understood now also with regard to Ezra as a key agent, right? A key malach, a key messenger in keeping the Jewish people going. All right, the Gemara comments.
Gemara comments on the Baraita. Rav Nachman said, "It is likely that the one who said that Maliki is Ezra is correct. For in the prophecy of Maliki it is written, Judah has dealt treacherously, and a disgusting thing has been done in Israel and Jerusalem. For Judah has profaned the holiness of Hashem, in that he has loved and married the daughter of an alien. Maliki assailed those who had taken Gentile wives. Now, who separated Gentile women from their Jewish husbands? It was Ezra, as it is written. Then Shechaniah, the son of Yechiel, of the sons of Elam, cried out and exclaimed to Ezra, we have transgressed against our God and have taken in alien women. Scripture proceeds to relate that Ezra charged those who had taken Gentile wives to get rid of them. From the similarity of their messages, it would seem that Ezra and Maliki were one and the same person.
Okay. So identifying them is one simple way of saying the issue is the same, right? The crisis that the Jewish people were facing is the identical crisis. It's being recognized in both of these works. So what is the way that the crisis is framed? It's about a physical reality that has impact on the spiritual future of the Jewish people. And specifically, it has to do with taking non-Jewish wives by the Jewish men of Judea. There's a note there at the bottom of the page that I just want to point out when it says and married the daughter of an alien. The literal translation is of an alien god. In other words, idol worshiping women were married by Jewish men. And the story, if you read the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, was about, are we going to continue being Jewish? Are we going to actually have a Jewish national identity that will be dedicated to the Jewish God and to the Jewish way of life? And the women that were being married were seen as a gigantic threat, that it was not going to be possible to continue a Jewish way of life with these idolatrous women, women that were adherents of the local faiths, the local religions, the local pagan religions. And what Ezra does is he causes a remarkable social upheaval and revolution, and he gets a huge number of people to separate from their wives and to say, for the sake of Jewish unity, we're sending away our wives. We're not going to have these wives stay as part of our family. We're going to divorce them, get rid of them, so that we can reestablish ourselves as a Jewish polity. So a lot of things have to be taken into account here. clearly what's being understood is that the non-Jewish wives were not assimilated into the Jewish people. The Torah stories assume, and they have to assume, simply because of the reality of the situation, they have to assume that whatever non-Jewish, quote unquote, that's an anachronistic term, whatever non-Jewish women came into the patriarchal family get subsumed into that family, right? So there's, of course, a little bit of an ambivalence. Jacob has to go away because Isaac and Rebekah say, we don't want him to marry any of the women from the Canaanite women, right? Esau married such women, and they were and Isaac and Rebekah were very upset. When Isaac has to have a mate, Abraham insists he can't marry one of these local women. He has to marry somebody, a distant cousin. That's fine, somebody from my family, but that's the only way. So there is a struggle with this all at the beginning, but the assumption is again and again and again. We just had Torah readings, Judah marries a Canaanite woman. The assumption is that the family unit is strong enough to take in somebody, a woman, right? Because the man is the patriarchal ruler of the home. So the woman always then loses her previous identity and goes in to join and be absorbed into the husband's family, right? For better or for worse, right? Obviously, this is patriarchal. This is not equality. This is not egalitarianism or anything like that. But what happens in the time of Ezra, the time of Meryl, I see your hand, but let me
Okay,
say
that's
it.
okay.
When we come to the time of Ezra, what we have is a small cohort of returnees, people who are returning from Babylonia and Persia to Judea. That's what makes them Jews, right? They are the remnant of a much vaster population. And with all of the exile and with all of the destruction of the first temple and so on and so forth, the dispersion of the Jewish people, there clearly are some people who stick around, right? There are people that fall through the cracks, and then the people that come back, they come into Judea. Who are they going to marry? What's the pool of candidates for them to build a family with, and how much of a critical mass of a Jewish polity is there to be able to absorb these foreign influences? This is now, of course, in the right wing all over Europe and the United States, this is their big worry, that the essential identity of France, the essential identity of Germany, the essential identity of Britain, the essential identity of the United States will be diluted and destroyed by all these aliens that are coming in. And it's an ugly kind of thing, which I find personally very ugly. But this is a different historical circumstance, and it's a different sociological circumstance. The Jewish people are fighting for their survival. They're fighting for their ability, after getting clobbered and losing huge chunks of their population and their people. Will they be able to resuscitate themselves as a people? So there's this very hard-nosed decision that we cannot do it if we have a huge influx of people who are not buying into what we're about. And we don't have enough people to absorb and assimilate them, right? No making no bones about this. If the person would join and assimilate into the Jewish people, that would be fine. But it's not happening. There are too many of them, and we're not strong enough. So what happens is this strategic decision on the part of Ezra and Nehemiah to say, we're going to close the wagons. We're going to circle the wagons. We're going to close in and we're going to try to build from scratch. We're going to try to build from only those people who really actually want to make a temple, really want to make a Jewish people again, and resuscitate ourselves in that kind of serious way. Many scholars, I find their argument compelling. Many scholars point to that moment as the moment when we flipped from patrilineal descent to matrilineal descent. In the Bible, in the Torah, it's clear that if your father is Abraham, then your kid is going to be quote unquote Jewish, right? Until there's some sort of selective thing. Abraham decides who's the heir and so on. Jacob's sons are Jacob's progeny. They are the 12 tribes of Israel. The fact that Bilhah and Zilpah, who weren't part of Jacob's family, are mothers for 4 of those tribes doesn't matter, because they're subsumed under the father's identity, right? But once we get to Ezra and Nehemiah, what Ezra is saying is the father's identity is not working here. What we see is in real terms is that the Jewish fathers are not creating Jewish kids. We need Jewish mothers to create Jewish kids. And that's where they say, okay, no non-Jewish mothers, only Jewish mothers. So that's 2,500 years ago. And that's where we were until the present generation or two, where now there's a pushback the other way. Merle. You wanted to say something? Merle.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have a question, but just parenthetically addressing something you said a few minutes ago. I think the essential nature of the United States is that we are from everywhere under the sun, not
Exactly.
one unified. Okay, so my question is, and I'm sure,
And which is what the pushback is about the people. No, we're a Christian nation. We're this and we're
Right.
that. Right. This is what's the covenant that
Right.
that creates this nation? Correct.
yeah. So my question is, and I'm sure you've covered it. I'm sure we've studied it. I've probably studied it 25 times, but I can't remember. What is the, when did the Israelites, the Jews, whatever, go from polygamy to monogamy?
So it happened in different stages in the Ashkenazi community. In other words, the European Jewish community, the community of Jews that lived in Europe under Christian control, that happened around the year 1000 CE, a little over 1,000 years.
Oh,
In the Muslim areas of Jewish living, North Africa and the Middle East, right? And so Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Libya, whatever, all of Syria, all of the Jewish communities under the Muslim sphere of influence, polygamy was officially accepted until 1950. And in 1950, the rabbis of the Sephardi community accepted the Ashkenazi prohibition against polygamy in the name of Jewish unity, because this was 2 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, where we had the ingathering of exiles. The same kind of thing is happening with Ezra, where we're saying, okay, now we're not living as separate peoples, separate communities that can go their own way. We're going to have to actually be able to live as one society with one set of social norms. So the Sephardi population at that time, under its religious leadership, said, we will relinquish the practice, which was a minority practice. It wasn't exactly like a common thing, but still on the books, it was allowed. We will relinquish that possibility, and we no longer allow polygamy.
So then the prohibition or the commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. What did that mean in the context of those days?
So it has nothing to do with polygamy or not. If a woman is married to a man, then adultery is defined as not having sexual relations with a woman who is married to somebody else. It doesn't matter if that woman is one of 20 other women who are married to that man, or if she's the exclusive wife of that man. As long as she is married, the man can, polygamy is allowed. The man can have many wives, and all of the wives that that man is married to are off limits to anybody else. The definition of adultery is somebody sleeping with somebody else's wife. And it doesn't matter how many wives you have. The man is not guilty of adultery for sleeping with a non-married woman if he's married. Right? This is a one-way street. This is part of the patriarchal, system. I'm not excusing it. It's not hopefully the way people think about things today, but that was the official rule.
Okay. All right. I was just curious, tying a few things together. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going more about Rachav. We mentioned Rachav before. So now we're tying up, just like Merle wanted to tie up a few things. The Gemara wants to tie up a few things also. What about Rachav? Remember, Rachav is the woman who sheltered, hid the two spies that Joshua sent into the land of Israel when the Jewish people were coming in to conquer the land. And she joined the Jewish people subsequently. And this, of course, is a little bit related now to this question. Well, she's a non-Jewish woman who successfully did join the Jewish people, right? But that was hundreds and hundreds of years before Ezra. It was in the time of Joshua. Go ahead. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I am now. I've got some issue with the thing. Anyway, more about Rachav. The rabbis taught in a Baraita there were 4 women of exceptional beauty in the world: Sarah, Abigail, Rachav, and Esther. The Gemara comments, according to the one who said that Esther was of greenish, that is sallow complexion, and appeared beautiful to Achashverosh only by dint of divine intervention, we are to omit Esther from the list and insert Vashti in her place. Okay, so these are the most beautiful women ever, right? This is like, one of those, the top 10. So here's the top 4. The note says, why is Abigail and Rachav in parentheses? Notes, yep, note
the
17.
Answer is, we don't have to read it. The answer is because Abigail came after Rachav. Abigail is during David's time, and Rachav is earlier, during Joshua's time. So they're split out. They're in the wrong chronological order. One way or the other, what we have is 3 women from within the Jewish community: Sarah, Abigail, and Esther. And we have 1 woman who's not from the Jewish community, Rachav. Okay, then we say, well, what about if Esther was not really beautiful? It was just a miracle that she had a certain kind of charm, and God made Achashverosh fall in love with her. She wasn't one of the most beautiful women in the world. We have to take out Esther. Who do we put in? Vashti. So then we got half and half. We've got half of the women from the Jewish community, half the women outside, women of the world. And of course, going back to some of the stuff that we read before, Vashti, of course, was a queen. And Rachav was perhaps simply a prostitute, right? So we have the highest echelons of society and the lowest echelons of society. Beauty knows no class. Okay.
Another Baraita about Rachav. The rabbis taught in a Baraita. Rachav inspired lust with her name. That is, by merely mentioning her name, one was driven to lust. Yael with her voice, Abigail by remembering her, Michal, daughter of Saul, with her appearance.
Okay, so this is now talking about other women. Yael wasn't mentioned in those top 4. Abigail was. Michal bat Shaul also not mentioned. So these are extra women added to this list, but now specifically not so much about whether they were beautiful, but their erotic appeal. right? What kind of attractiveness that they had. So Rachav Bishma Zinta. Rachav inspired lust with her name, right? Just the name Rachav, all of a sudden people couldn't control themselves. The word Rachav is, of course, introduced in the book of Joshua as Rachav HaZonah. Rachav, the Zonah. And that was, we talked about it last time. Does that mean a food purveyor, an innkeeper, or does it mean a prostitute? So here, this is following the idea that Rachav HaZonah means Rachav, the very name Rachav is already the sexual promiscuity starts right with mentioning her name. Okay, here goes the Gemara.
The Gemara adds, Rabbi Yitzchak said, whoever says Rachav, Rachav will immediately emit a seminal discharge. Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, I say Rachav, Rachav, and I am not concerned that anything might happen. Rabbi Yitzchak said to him, when I said that repeating Rachav's name will cause a discharge, I was referring to one who knows her and is familiar with her.
Okay, so here you have one of the sterling, one of the great peaks of Talmudic literature, where, this is like locker room talk, among the men, before they get appointed to the Supreme Court or something, or to become the president. Expanding on the idea that Rachav was so attractive or so, hot would be the word we have today, that if you just said her name a couple of times, you couldn't control yourself. So then the other guy goes, oh yeah, watch this. Rachav, Rachav, nothing happened to me. So his answer is, the other sage's answer is, because this is abstract for you. This is just a mind game for you. I'm talking about people who actually knew her. People who knew her could not control themselves. They were just like besotted with desire for her, with uncontrollably. So this is, like I say, not exactly one of the more elevated parts of Talmudic discourse. We've got a bunch of guys talking about how hot certain women are and about what their own physical reactions are to this particular person. And in the end, of course, they're saying, but this is theoretical, right? We're not talking about somebody, that we actually know. We're talking about somebody who once upon a time we knew, somebody knew, right? I just want to say this is a little bit, of course, though, in the thread, either in some kind of subterranean way. This is, of course, part of the struggle in general with the other, the woman who is an other, right? Ezra's solution to keeping the purity of the Jewish people was get rid of them, right? So this is, women are the problem. Women are too seductive. Women are too, they have no power whatsoever because they actually have all the power in the world. They'll destroy us. We have no power over ourselves when we are confronted with these non-Jewish women. So this is part of in an indirect kind of way, the sages as men and as Jewish men struggling with, they're supposed to have a privileged position, but they also realize that there's something shaky about this whole situation, and they try to come, to get it under some kind of control. Stuart, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed by passages like this, but it does humanize the rabbis. It humanizes them, but it also lowers them in some sense. This is a frivolous question, but apropos to Esther's being homely, what's the Jewish lore? What are you supposed to do if you go to a wedding and the bride is really homely, and what are you supposed to say about her?
So that's a discussion in the tractate Ketubot.
Okay.
So in about another 5 or 10 years, we'll get there. And
so.
it's a classic dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. It's a classic dispute about Shammai says that you have to tell the truth. And you're never allowed to lie. You're never allowed to bend.
It takes the Kantian line.
Right. So, and Hillel says baloney, because if this person has been chosen to be the wife of somebody, so she must have some appealing qualities. Find those qualities and celebrate that. Celebrate the love itself. Celebrate the fact that she is now the partner with this other human being, and what an amazing thing that is to be able to be. So and the phrase is Ketzad merakdim lifnei hakala. How do we dance before the kala? How do we before the bride? And the answer, this is the Gemara's question, and the Beit Shammai says kala kamot shehi. You have to say exactly what she is.
Right.
Oh, and Hillel says, what are you kidding? And they say, no, you say kala na'av achasuda. You say, oh, what a pleasant and pious and charming bride she is. And then there are the rhetorical questions, which are obvious to one side and not to the other. A person comes to you, says Hillel, Beit Hillel, and says, they come to you and they say, look, I just bought this jacket. Look at this jacket. Anybody that saw The Good Place, this was a scene in The Good Place, and you think the jacket, you're about to throw up. You think the jacket is the ugliest thing you've ever seen, and this person is so happy that they have this jacket that they bought, because for them it's just wonderful. It's like the fulfillment of all their dreams. They always wanted to have this kind of like jacket. For them, for their taste, this is like a dream come true. So Beis Hillel says, what are you supposed to say? No, your jacket is the most ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. No, you say, oh, wonderful, good for you, Mazel Tov, wear it in good health. Be nice. And find a way to be nice. That's the Gemara's discussion over there. In the theater they have those questions all the time. When you have to go backstage after a performance, or a new play or something like that, and you think that the play was garbage, and you think that the performance was terrible. When you go backstage, then what are you going to do? And there's a whole art form developed by theater people to be gracious and be nice, and I've never seen anything like it. So you're nice. You try to be nice.
Well, try writing letters of recommendation for we're not good students.
Letters of recommation is a very tough. It's a very tough thing, and it's gotten worse, right? Because you get in trouble if you actually try to be honest. Yeah. So, and of course that it's damaging, because that's different. See, that's where the laws of Lashon Hara don't apply to that kind of situation. But in our society, unfortunately, we have such a litigious society that you're afraid that you're going to get in trouble if you actually try to say the truth. Yeah.
In the business world, human resources policy, just universally, I think, is that if somebody asks for a reference, if somebody contacts an employer to ask for a reference, you're not allowed to say anything except, yes, they worked here between so and so and so and so.
Right.
I guess because there were too many lawsuits.
That's the solution, right? That's the solution. You'd say the truth about how long they were there, and then the person reads between the lines.
Right.
Right. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Bottom of 15A2, left-hand column.
The Gemara resumes its exposition of the Megillah's narrative. And Mordecai knew all that had been done, and he cried a loud and bitter cry. What did Mordecai say in his cry? Rav said, Mordecai cried, Haman is haughtier than Achashverosh. Haman was bold enough to propose the destruction of the Jews, in contrast to Achashverosh, excuse me, who had not even thought of such an undertaking.
Another way to translate that is that Haman has gone higher than Achashverosh, right? Because Achashverosh in the end, allows him, gives him power to do this. If it was up to Achashverosh, none of this would have happened. So Haman has gone beyond. It's not so much a question of being personally haughty, but he's gone beyond Achashverosh. It would have been bad enough to live under the auspices of Achashverosh. But now we've got Haman. Like we see what's happening in our own country. It would have been bad enough, 10 years ago with some of the stuff that was going on. But now we have people in power who are much, much worse.
Yes.
Talking about the Supreme Court and about certain state legislatures. Yeah. Go ahead.
And Shmuel said, Mordecai cried, the upper king, that is God, has prevailed over the lower king, that is Achashverosh, a euphemistic reference to the opposite.
In other words, how could it be? Can it be that the lower king, back to that mentioning of Hamelech, who's in charge here? Is this really going to be the case that these lower political powers will have their way against God's own will? This is Mordecai's crying out. So the first one is within the political, distribution of power down below, Haman versus Achashverosh. And the second suggestion is that it's a much more piercing cry. Is God going to give up on this? Is whatever happening down here going to prevail? Okay, and of course, as it says, it's a euphemistic. We don't say that in the language of the Talmud. You wouldn't say that outright, so you say the opposite. We've had it before. We'll have it again. Sometimes we talk about the destruction of the enemies of Israel, and it really means the destruction of Israel. But you don't say that. You say Soneim Shel Yisrael, and everybody knows what you're talking about is, God forbid, our own troubles, but you say it by flipping it around, because you can't say such a terrible thing. Okay, the Gemara states further.
The Gemara states further, and the cavity of the queen's body wilted. What does "and the cavity of her body wilted" mean? The Gemara has two explanations. Rav said she began to menstruate, and Rabbi Yirmiyah said her bowels loosened.
Right, so titchalchal means that she trembled with a great trembling. She was super panicked and afraid. That's the literal translation. So I mean, this editorial decision to make it into cavities first is, I think, a mistake. What it is then the two explanations make it into cavities. The two explanations take it as this fear had an effect on the inner organs of Esther. When we say the blessing for the bathroom, we say, Asher Yetzaras Adam Chachma V'Ravo Nekavim Chalulim, right? You created in us orifices and empty spaces within our bodies that open and close at the proper time. And if they don't open and close at the proper time, we're in big trouble. Right, and that's why we thank God for being able to discharge our bodily waste in a normal way, right? So here, that's what we then take. The Rav and Rabbi Yirmiyah take that step and say what actually happened when she was so frightened, right? And the answer is either as a woman, this started her bleeding, or as a human being, she made in her pants. That's something that a man or a woman could do if they are totally afraid. So back to Stuart's point before, this is the kind of like down to earth stuff that they're not afraid to say and not afraid to record. In this particular case, I don't think it reflects badly on them per se. But so in that sense, we have to then apply it back to the other thing, that they're very, very upfront about the fact that we are subject to, to physical, what can I say, experiences that are not always, things that we're proud of or happy with. Okay. The following verse. Now you're on mute.
Sorry. The following verse states, then Esther summoned Hasach. Rav said,
Hatach.
oh, that's, I can never tell which is.
Yeah, you have to cheat. You have to look at the.
And then Esther summoned Hatak. Rav said, say again? Hatak.
Hey, tav, chaf. Hatach.
Hatak. Rav said the royal officer identified as Hatak was actually Daniel. And why was Daniel given the name Hatak? Because they had cut him down from his greatness. Achashverosh had demoted him from the high position he enjoyed in the courts of the previous king, Belshazzar, Darius, and Cyrus. And Shmuel said Daniel was called Hatak because all the royal affairs were decided by him.
Okay, so you have two opposite ideas, and actually that your pronunciation ends up becoming part of the discussion here. The word hatach is now read as chatach, right? The hey becomes a ch.
Oh, okay.
Right, so and the note says this is a common midrashic idea. So who is this hatach? So the same way that we've said before, who is Malachi? Let's find some identifiable, more famous person that we can give this name to. So here, this name Hatach, who the Megillah apparently thinks that we should know who this Hatach guy is, because it just says, it doesn't, say who he was. It just says, oh, and then Esther called Hatach and told her to go to talk to Mordechai. So what's going on here? Who is this famous Hatach? So the answer is it's Daniel. However, we have two opposite explanations for why Daniel should be called Hatach. Right? In one explanation, the first one, he was cut down from his high standing. And according to the second one, it's because he is the authoritative advisor. Behind the scenes, he's the one who's chotech barim. He's the one, whatever he says, he cuts to the chase, and that's it. What he says is the rule. So, okay. Now that's, again, there's no way to decide one way or the other. It just brings up the precariousness of, political positions. Much later, this happens again and again and again. If you look at the history of the Jews of Spain, but also in whenever you had court Jews, and that's part of what happens here. Daniel is the almost the original court Jew. Whenever you had Jews who were somehow close to the ruler and therefore had tremendous amount of power, they were always not because of that power. They were targets. They were targets of people who were jealous. They were targets of hatred. They were targets of competitors. And you have again and again and again and again and again throughout Jewish history, people who have been, in these really important positions, and the Jewish community always depended on having people in those kinds of important places of power so that they could get protected, so that they could get favors. And it was most of the time short-lived, because that person would then be resented by the other people, and they would be assassinated, they would be imprisoned, they would be mostly killed. So that's the way it goes. You lived for a short time within that glory, and then the glory actually did you in. Okay.
The Megillah states further, Esther sent Hatach to Mordechai to find out what this was and why it was. Rabbi
Right? In
Yitzchak,
the Hebrew, it is lada'at, to know, mazeh ve'al mazeh. What is this? And about what is this? Okay? Mazeh ve'al mazeh.
Rabbi Yitzchak said, this teaches that Esther submitted the following message to Mordechai. Perhaps Israel has transgressed the 5 books of the Torah, of which it is written, on this side and on this side they are written.
Right? Mizeh u'mizeh heim ktuvim. Right? This is the description of the tablets of the law given by God at Sinai. So the Midrash is making a pun, right? Mazeh v'al mazeh, mizeh u'mizeh heim ktuvim. Right? Is it possible that we have brought punishment down upon ourselves because we have not been loyal to the Torah, which is written on this and on this side of the tablets? Okay.
Mordechai told Hatak to instruct Esther to plead with Ahasuerus for her people. Esther refused because it was a capital offense to approach the king without being summoned, and she told Hatak to relate this response to Mordechai. The Megillah then states, and they told Mordechai,
On 15a3,
they told Mordechai the words of Esther. The verse does not said, and he, that is Hatak, told. Instead it says, and they told. This implies that others informed Mordechai of Esther's position. But Hatak himself did not go back to Mordechai. Hatak did not wish to relay back to Mordechai the bad news of Esther's refusal to carry out Mordecai's request, and therefore Esther had to submit her message with others. From here, we learned that when sent on a mission, one should not report back with bad news.
okay. So here we have the kind of struggle that people in these, corridors of political intrigue have to, cope with. Hatak is now, he's the go-between, right? So Mordechai tells him to go and tell Esther that she has to, use her power to, get Ahasuerus to help out, right? And then Esther refuses. She goes, "Are you kidding? I'll get killed. I'm not doing it." So that's her initial response. And then it says that they tell this response back to Mordechai, and the Gemara here has a very close reading, and it says, it doesn't say he, it says they, right? In other words, Hatak absents himself from being the middleman. He doesn't want to continue to be the go-between. He doesn't want to face Mordechai with telling him Esther's refusal. Right? And so therefore somebody else had to do it, right? She had to get other people to go and convey this. So in this kind of like very, it's a little artificial kind of thing, but nevertheless, it actually, I think, has a real sensitivity to these pressures that people find themselves in these complicated, compromising situations, right? When do you keep on going with things, and when do you finally say, I can't do this anymore? Let somebody else do it. I can't buy into this. We had a whole industry, when Trump was the president, when would certain people that were in his inner, circle, when would they finally say it's enough? When would they finally actually, leave? And people took shorter times or longer times to get out, or didn't get out at all. But this is the reality always. This is the reality everywhere. When is it, look, I am a faithful servant, and I will do what I'm asked to do, even if I don't, like it. Is that a point of honor? Or when is the point of honor in the end saying, you know what, I'm not facilitating this. I'm not going to actually make this possible to happen. Let somebody else do it. So here we have again, the situation that Hatak finds himself in. Also, the situation that Esther is understood to be in. According to this way of reading it, Esther has to be, continuing to insist that she's not going to do it. Right? It's not just like one, immediately blurting out, "Oh, are you kidding? I can't do that." And Hatach goes and tells Mordechai. Like Hatach says, "I'm out of here." And then she goes out and she has to actually make sure that her refusal to help is conveyed to Mordechai. And then we have, of course, after that, we have Mordechai's very, very poignant, statement. Why do you think you're queen? Who knows if not for this moment that you have been put into this place? Remember that salvation will come to the Jewish people somehow. If it's not from you, it'll be somebody else. It'll be somehow, I don't know how, but the Jewish people will be saved. It can't not happen. But do you want to be part of the solution? Do you want to be part of the salvation? Who knows? Right? So again, never mentioning God's name, but talking about his faith in the destiny of the Jewish people. And do you want to put yourself in with that destiny and be part of it? Or do you want to walk away? So what we have here is also just, again, a stronger sense of her own fear and her own initial refusal. I don't want to go there. I don't want to be part of this. Leave me out of it, right? It's heightened by the way that the Gemara reads Hatach's refusal to participate. Right? He is refusing to tell the news. She is refusing to save the Jewish people. Okay, the Megillah states further.
The Megillah states further, Esther said to Mordecai, "Go, assemble all the Jews, etc., until, which is not like the custom." Rabbi Abba explained Esther's words. It will not be like the custom.
Read, wait, hold a second. Read, because you should just understand the verse. 27.
Verse 27 from Esther, verse 4. After she eventually agreed to approach Achashverosh, Esther told Mordecai, "Go assemble all the Jews found in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I, with my maids, will fast also."
Fast.
I'm sorry?
I, with my maids, will fast also.
Will fast also. Then I will go to the king, which is not like the custom, and if I am lost, I am lost.
Okay, so that's the thing. After Mordechai gives her that speech about who knows if not for this moment you have been chosen to be queen, she agrees, right? And she says, but now I'm going to need some help. So I want the whole community to fast and pray on my behalf, and I will also. So I'm not just going to jump right into talking to him. So I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to, again, interesting way of putting it. They don't mention the word God, but they talk about these religious practices. And then I'm going to break protocol, asher lo kadat, not according to the custom. In other words, I will break protocol and I will go to the king and risk my life. And if I die, I die. Right? That's her response. So now the Gemara starts reading it. Esther said to Mordechai, now read from there again.
Esther said to Mordecai, "Go, assemble all the Jews, etc., until, which is not like the custom." Rabbi Abba explained Esther's words. It will not be like the custom of every day, because every day until now, I had relations with Achashverosh under compulsion, but from now on, it will be with my consent.
Okay, so instead of breaking the protocol, meaning the simple understanding is you're only allowed to come to the king when the king summons you. That's the rule, and I'm going to break that rule, and I'm going to initiate contact with the king. I'm going to, come and appear before him without being asked, and that's what she says. The king says, if you come before me when I didn't ask you, I'm going to kill you. So that's the simple reading of the story. And now what the Gemara reads in is no. What's going to be breaking the custom? What's the usual? Asher lo kadat. The usual has been that I would be summoned by Achashverosh, and I would have no choice. I would have to sleep with him because that's, otherwise I would get killed. So that's the way it's always been until now. We had this whole discussion about this earlier, about what, how could this possibly be going on with Esther. And now what she says is, by my taking the initiative, I'm breaking that practice. now this means that I am voluntarily coming, because this is the Gemara understands that she's not just going to have a conversation with Achashverosh. There's going to have to be, some, conjugal, relations as well. She says, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to be responsible for the fact that I took this upon myself. I've done this of my own free will, right? And then continue.
Esther's message concludes, and if I am lost, I am lost. This means, just as I am lost from my father's house, so too shall I be lost from you. That is, by submitting voluntarily to Achashverosh, Esther would be forever forbidden to Mordecai, her legitimate husband.
Okay, so they take it away from the idea that maybe she would be killed because she comes to Achashverosh without being bidden, without being invited, and they turn it into this point, that until now, I had the excuse that this was being forced upon me. But if I'm going to go there myself of my own free will, then that excuse disappears. And then back to the adultery point, then I am an adulteress. And because according to the Talmud, they set it up before that she was Mordecai's wife. And she says, just as I lost my parents, and then you became my guardian, and you became my love, so I will lose you now. I will never be able to be with you ever again, because I will have engaged in willing adultery. So it turns the story into this other kind of conflict and other kind of struggle, right? That Esther is engaged in, right? Instead of it being life and death, it's about relations. It's about love. It's about who she's going to be connected with. And she says, this will be it. It'll sever my connection with you. Now, of course, why is she doing this? To save the Jewish people, right? She's doing this because she wants Achashverosh to overturn Haman's rulings and save the lives of all of the Jewish people. So that's the point of all this. Nevertheless, she says that I'm willing to do that, but I recognize that it will shatter my own life, right? Not just on life and death question, right? But on the contrary, if I actually succeed, not off with her head, he cuts her head off because she had the chutzpah to show up. If I actually succeed in being welcomed by him and being with him to get on his good side so that he'll actually listen to me, if I do that, I will be lost. I will end up losing you and losing what's precious to me. So that's a very deep paradox, right? This is on behalf of the Jewish people, I will lose myself from being part of the Jewish people. My connection with Mordecai will be severed, and I will then be a willing adulteress in the king's palace. That's it. All right, any comments on this? Because this is very much also reflective of ongoing issues within Jewish history. And not just on Jewish history in general. All of the sabotage and subterfuge stories that are so entertaining, double agents and this and that and the other thing. There's, the heart is not made out of stone. You're supposed to train yourself a certain way to do certain things which you're not, usually are not done. Ashalo kadat, which are not really the way you're supposed to, set up your life. And somehow or other, it's all for the greater good. But what damage does it do to the person who actually engages in this? So this is the Gemara's noting that this possibility. David, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the Megillah. Is this the last we hear of her in the Megillah?
The last we hear of who? Of Esther?
Esther, yeah.
No, of course not. This is the beginning. This is right before she then goes to the king and says, I want to have a party with you, and I want you to invite Haman. And then they have another party, and she gets Achashverosh to finally recognize that Haman is the bad guy, and that he was trying to, this is the middle of the story.
No, I meant the ark. Once the ark is completed and Haman is exposed, and Haman and his family are eradicated.
No, then the end of the story is Esther and Mordechai start telling everybody to celebrate Purim. Yeah. All right, we're going to stop here. And, oh, wait, Merle, yeah. No, you're on mute. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Errol, unmute yourself.
I have a question. It's not about this, but since we're a small group, I thought maybe I could ask.
What?
I'm of a certain age, and when I studied, we had Sunday school and Hebrew school, the S was not the T, was the way we pronounce things. So I'm okay with Shabbat. I finally got that. But everything else, what I'm saying, especially if it's a prayer that I know, from childhood, I can't get rid of the S. And I'm just wondering, since you, all of you are, you pray, you were educated around the same time that I am. So when you're saying this to yourself, or even out loud, maybe, do you use the S or the T? I know we use the T now, but in your silent prayers.
I use in my own prayers, when I'm not leading prayers for the congregation, I use the S. And every once in a while I make a mistake and I even say the S, even, in front of the congregation. When I make my own prayer, when I get an aliyah, I make the prayer using the S mostly. So that's how I was brought up. And that's my own thing.
Well, you speak Hebrew, so it's easier for you to.
I switch back and forth.
Yeah.
I go both ways.
Anybody else want to comment and educate me on, how much of a struggle you have with this?
I don't have a struggle at all because I wasn't raised that way. I learned the Sephardic pronunciation from the get-go.
Oh,
so
okay.
Sometimes I don't know really quite why, particularly when I came back from the 3 months that I spent in Hungary, where of course the pronunciation is incomprehensible to somebody from the West. I would sometimes pray that way just to remember what I've now forgotten completely. But I would do that. But it took a great effort for me to do it the old Ashkenazic way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to stop here.
Thanks for indulging me.
Right. Happy Hanukkah to everybody. Happy Rosh Chodesh.
Chag Orim Sameach.
Everybody's invited 5:30 tonight.